This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and today we have something a little bit unusual. This is a GE AMFM stereo radio from 1969, and when I say stereo, I mean it reproduces FM stereo broadcast. It's a solid state unit. It has some problems. The switches need to be cleaned. The tone control is damaged. It just spins all the way around, so that potentiometer will likely have to be replaced. And the filter capacitors are shot, as you can hear. I had some reception earlier, but you play with these switches. Okay, so now I'm not getting anything, so let's just open it up and see if we can fix this. Here's the inside. This is our culprit right here, this cardboard tube filter capacitor. You'd have thought by 69 they would have stopped using those, especially in the solid state sets, but apparently not. This is also a line driven set, meaning it doesn't have a power transformer. We have high voltage on our audio output stages with these big dropping resistors that drop the voltage down for the signal stages. Now, like any other GE, they're always a pain in the butt to take apart. In fact, I think GE had people laying awake at night trying to figure out ways to make it difficult to get their products apart, and I'm sure this radio will be no exception. Okay, we have the chassis out, and the way you remove the chassis is first unsolder the leads going to the speakers. Then you remove about a jig in screws, and then you unsnap the chassis from the plastic cabinet, and I also remove the dial scale, as you can see there, in case I need to get to this portion. But right now, let's unsolder this defective filter capacitor and go ahead and get that out of the way. And here it is, a Planet brand capacitor, not known for longevity. It's 100 microfarad and a 50 microfarad, both sections at 150 working volts. Our 50 microfarad is reading 6.4 microfarad. Let's see what the 100 reads. And the 100 is reading, let's just say 10 microfarad. Frankly, I'm surprised this set wasn't humming louder than it was. Okay, there they are on the board. And the next thing to address is cleaning the controls, and that'll be accomplished by spraying some control cleaner in each control and then working the controller switch back and forth several times. And here's our busted tone control. That looks like that was a result of possibly shipping damage, or something that whacked it real hard. So we'll take that apart, and I will try to repair that control. I don't know if I'm going to be successful or not, but all we can do is try. Okay, here's our tone potentiometer removed from the chassis. Since it's a stereo dual channel set, there's actually two potentiometers mounted back to back here. So we're going to attempt to put all this back together and hope it works. Okay, we have it back together. I sprayed some contact cleaner in it, and everything rotates as it should. Now, before we reinstall it, we'll connect an ohm meter and make sure it functions as it should. Okay, as it stands now, everything's working like it should, so we're ready to install the control back in the chassis. And before you get on me, most of the time these ganged potentiometers have the terminals on the same side. This GE set is not that way. So just wanted to clear that up before anybody gets on me about putting it back together wrong. Okay, we have the potentiometer reinstalled in the board, and now I think it'd be a good time to connect the speakers and see how it performs. Okay, we're back together and working.
It's just great to listen to, especially that. Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan, Chaka Khan. Shaka Khan, let me rock, Shaka Khan. Let me rock, it's all up on the do, Shaka Khan, let me rock, Shaka Khan.
To the Newsmaker, only on the Gallo Radio Show, the GT Show, and Head to Head, and only on 103.3 FM, Super Talk.
Obviously, the FM oscillator is way out of alignment. That's 103, and we're coming in right just shy of 100.
News Mississippi.
403 for News Mississippi.
On the latest products at Golfsmith and
You don't say. I come to know there's life in.
Would you like to know more?
You can join all your friends on Facebook and see what's happening with Meridian's Classic Hits. Check us out on Facebook and 95.1 The Buzz.
Okay, let's check AM out.
To boost a woman's sexual desire by affecting brain chemistry. If the drug is approved, the FDA says it may invoke additional precautions, like making sure doctors are certain.
LeBron James, you always got to be locked into your game plan. You're not.
And with a knife and that he threatened to behead them. Zoologists are watching a 100-year-old turtle at a zoo in China closely. She's believed to be one of the last of her species.
And it's more in line
an iconic
than the FM is.
Joy 1450.
I still haven't solved the oscillator problem yet, but you notice this transformer right here, or coil, is not seated very well on the circuit board. Same goes for that output transformer down there. So while we're waiting on a schematic for this to arrive so I can fix the oscillator problem, let's seat these parts on the circuit board in a neater fashion. Okay, back on the GE radio, and as you recall, the biggest problem that we're now faced with is the calibration of the FM dial is way off, and when that happens, that's usually something in the FM oscillator circuit. Now, let's take a look at the schematic diagram for this thing. Here's our FM oscillator circuit that consists of a transistor and some resistors and capacitors, and then we have the oscillator coil here. Now, this capacitor here is our variable tuning capacitor, or one section of it, and we have a 5.6 picofarad capacitor in parallel with it. Now, most sets, instead of having a fixed capacitor here, they have a trimmer capacitor, and that way if you need to make adjustments, you can just simply adjust the trimmer capacitor, and that'll get you back where you need to be. So I don't know why GE chose to use a fixed capacitor in this application, because dealing with FM, it's very touchy. Any one of these other components could drift off ever so slightly and throw the alignment off. In fact, I could probably check all of these components with an ohm meter, and they would all probably check just fine. Or I say ohm meter, check the resistors with an ohm meter. I'd need my capacitance meter to check the capacitors. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this 5.6 picofarad capacitor with this variable trimmer capacitor that you see here. And that way I can adjust the set to where it needs to be, and then if it drifts off in the future, hopefully in the distant future, all I'll have to do is go back in and adjust this trimmer and bring it back into alignment. Here's the capacitor, a 5.6 picofarad. It measures 6.4 picofarad, but I don't really put a lot of stock in that, because when you get down to values this low, it's very hard to get an accurate reading, especially on standard shop grade service equipment like what I have. but I'm not really worried about that. I'm going to install the variable trimmer in its place and adjust it to the correct frequency and hope it all works out. Okay, we have it back together and have the trimmer adjusted as good as I can get it. The dial is still not completely accurate. I had to compromise between getting the high end of the dial right and the low end of the dial right, which that's often a problem, but it's working pretty good now. That's 106.9. It's coming in, yeah, a little bit off. That's the hard-to-receive hip-hop station. Not that I'd ever want to receive it.
For today's R&B and Old School Kiss 104.1, Kelly Price.
A free call from C-Spire. Now, the other thing we want to do is nonplussed. Two people.
Yeah, even the talk has moved its way to FM now.
Here's You Lie. It's the band Perry on 97.0 KK.
It ain't complicated. Well, I've grown to hate it.
Whenever I ever called you in 22 years and told you I was coming home, and then you said you didn't, and you started crying, and then you told me that I had to.
Research is also legal. You do know. Right, shout out. I didn't even see. So loving, so good.
Yeah, I think they need to bump it up a little bit. They're a little weak. There's our tone control that we had to repair. It doesn't have much tonal range, but I can tell that the control is working.
For
might look like.
Okay, there you go. That ought to wrap up the 1969 GE AMFM stereo radio. Thanks for watching, and more to come later. Today we have a General Television, little all-American 5-tube AM radio, probably from the early 40s. We're going to attempt to rehab this thing back to health. As you can see, it needs a good cleaning. The speaker is pretty much shot, but I'm sure we can come up with a speaker around here somewhere. And look at all these old capacitors that need to be replaced. In fact, this one here looks pretty nasty. I can see this electrolytic capacitor has been replaced at some point. It looks like they tacked it across the old one that was in there. So that will have to be corrected. That's a major no-no. You never tack a good capacitor across an old bad one. Okay, we have all of the capacitors replaced, as well as a few resistors that were out of tolerance. There was a big resistor here that someone had replaced that I didn't like the looks of, and what they replaced was still good, but I wanted to use something smaller that would be neater looking, so that's what we did. And we're about to the point where I can apply power to this chassis and see where we're going with it, see what else we need to do. And I also replaced the number 47 dial indicator bulb here because the filament was open. Now let's bring it up, see what happens. Well, not a darn thing. No current draw, no life from the chassis, which means one of three things. Either we have an open tube filament, we have an open in the power cord, or the power switch is open. And a few ohm meter checks will determine which one. Well, we have not one but two tubes with open filaments, the 12SQ7, which is the first audio and AVC tube, and the 35Z5, which is the rectifier tube. I suspect the 35Z5 might have got blown when someone plugged this in with an old bad filter capacitor in it, but I don't know that. Anything could have happened. Okay, with good tubes installed, I'm reading about 142 ohms across the power plug, so that means we have continuity. Now let's reapply power and see what happens. Ah, that's better. We're about 60 volts AC input. We already have a little faint glow from the dial light. We just let it warm up a while, and then if nothing bad happens, we'll bring it up to 120 volts. Well, we have action. Of course, as you might expect, that speaker sounds like crap and will have to be replaced. Bring it up to 120.
5 Muslim armies invaded, 5 Arab armies invaded to try and throw Israel out of this part of the world. They do not believe in that.
I wonder what's up with that.
So go by and see them today at H&H Auto Sales.
Okay, this is weird. It's 70 volts AC applied to the radio. It receives stations as it should, but when I raise the voltage up...
Yes, Street. Pizza sounds good. Ballroom Street? Rolling Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Get up to about 100 volts, it starts doing that nonsense. So my theory on what's going on is one of the stages in the radio is getting too much B+ voltage as the set warms up, or whenever I apply full line voltage. And we'll turn it back down.
Because if I had an email for all the people that love you, I'd be a millionaire. People love you.
You'd have a couple emails.
Okay, let's make some voltage measurements and see if we can determine what's going on here. Okay, checking the plate voltage on the 12SK7 IF amplifier tube.
I kind of want to see that kid.
About 102 volts, and when I apply my meter, the motorboating goes away. Now look at what else I discovered. Look at this, notice this lead right here? Watch what happens when I move it away.
Not to be like a Dennis Don Kirshner, and be a great promoter, but it's not a good attitude when, girls...
So, yep, lead dress problem.
Right, that's a horrible thing. But, look, there were 2,000 people there,
His attitude is, look, out of 2,000 people, there's going to be a...
This lead here was too close to this other lead.
It was a good party. Not the attitude. I think if a lawyer had talked to him, he wouldn't have given that interview. That's the lesson from this.
Yeah, those two leads running that close together was acting like a small capacitor and causing our problem. And the wires that were interacting, this is our output of the second IF transformer going to the detector here, and this lead here is our audio feed coming off the center of the volume control. So yeah, those wires are just a little bit too close to one another and causing enough stray capacitance to throw the whole thing off. Okay, let's take care of this speaker. It's so ratty, I'm not even going to try to repair it. And you can see here that someone has either replaced this speaker or at the very minimum the audio output transformer, judging by this mess here. I think we can do a better job with that. Okay, there's our primary connected to the output transformer. Yeah, heat shrink tubing looks a lot neater than just twisting and soldering the wires and letting them dangle into midair. Now, a problem. In the old days, most tube radios required an audio output transformer. This device is an impedance matching device to match the high impedance of the audio output tube to the low impedance of the loudspeaker voice coil, roughly 3.2 to 8 ohms. Well, back then, the output transformer was usually mounted to the speaker frame, just like in this set. And as you can see on these older speaker frames, they actually gave you a place to mount the transformer. Now, for the exception of some modern PA speakers that have a place to mount a 70-volt matching transformer, these newer speakers don't have any place to mount the audio output transformer, so we'll have to get creative and mount that somewhere else. And since we have all this room under the chassis that we obtained when we replaced these huge electrolytic filter capacitors with something much more smaller, I think we're going to mount our transformer right in here. Okay, here's what we did. We mounted our output transformer here. Our primary winding is on this side, and it's all soldered and heat shrinked up, so there's no problem there. Here's our secondary winding, which these windings are very fragile. It's very easy for these leads to break off where they enter the transformer, so I wanted to minimize that risk. So we have our transformer leads soldered to this terminal strip here that I installed, and here are the leads going to the speaker, so even if these leads get vibrated, it won't place any undue strain on these leads. So there's a near zero chance that these leads will ever break from any kind of abuse or stress. Okay, let's fire it up and see how it performs now. And just as a little added measure to keep these leads where I want them to stay, I used a cable tie to hold them in position. Now that speaker sounds a lot better, doesn't it?
One, it was a movement initiated by Americans, some of whom have tuberculosis. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that they should be coming over the border. I'm talking about these two Americans.
No, I just want to see what you think about that. I want to see where you're at politically.
One thing that's interesting, when I turn the fluorescent light off, it sounds like we're getting some modulation hum.
Proper health care.
Now let's address the AC power cord. It's obvious this has been replaced, and whoever did it did not do it correctly. They at least should have tied a knot here for strain relief. And since this is a hot chassis set, which means it has one side of the AC power line connected directly to the chassis, I want to try to redo this power input situation to make it as safe as possible. With this non-polarized plug, there's a 50-50 chance that the hot side of the line will be going to the chassis, and if you're touching an exposed control shaft or whatever while touching something that's grounded, you could receive a nasty shock or at worst kill yourself. So what we want to do is install a polarized AC power cord and rewire the power switch from the present neutral side of the line, and we want to wire it into the hot side of the line. That way when the set is turned off, it's not a hot chassis in its current state. With the set turned off, even if the plug was oriented correctly so the chassis wouldn't be hot when the set was on, with it turned off, you'd still have a hot chassis because of the path provided to the chassis through the tube filaments. So that's why we want to move this to the hot side of the line. Hopefully there won't be any hum or performance issues. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. It's the reason I wanted to basically save this part to last and do a comparison of the two. Okay, here's what we've done. Narrow blade of the power cord, hot side to switch. Lead coming from switch down here to our rectifier tube. And then we have the wide blade, which is the neutral side, going straight to the chassis. So, let's fire it up and see how it performs.
Just the fact that those aren't...
Okay, it seems to be working.
The best way to describe it is...
Okay, I've done a little cleanup on the chassis. It looks a lot better now. We now have our trusty old 1940s era triplet RF signal generator connected to the radio, and we're about to align the IF transformers and the trimmers on the tuning capacitor. But first we'll give our generator the customary 15-minute warm-up time. Radio's been on all morning, so it's nice and warmed up. Okay, our generator has warmed up. We have it set to the IF frequency of 455 kilocycles. We have our generator output attenuated just enough to give a usable signal. We don't want it wide open because that would cause the AVC circuit in the radio to give us false results. We have our hot side of the generator connected to the mixer grid of the 12SA7, low side to chassis, and this generator has an isolation capacitor already inside of it for the hot side, so that's taken care of. And what we want to adjust is this trimmer here for maximum output, and then we'll move to these two trimmers and adjust them for maximum output, and then we will continue to adjust until no further improvement can be made. Okay, there's that one. Turn our output of the signal generator down. Adjust these two. Well, that was good. Okay, I'm going to have to do this one off camera because our plastic screwdrivers are not stout enough to adjust this, and I don't want to accidentally short something out with this metal one like we almost just did. So, let me do this off camera. We're adjusting these two trimmers for maximum output. Okay, we have those trimmers maxed out. Now we'll adjust these on the side here on the tuning capacitor. First we'll adjust the RF trimmer. And for that operation we have our signal generator set to 1700 kilocycles. Same goes for the radio dial, and we're just radiating a signal from the signal generator into our loop antenna. And the trimmer we want to adjust is this one. Where is it? Right back here hidden behind the loop antenna. It's the one on this first gang right here. Okay, we have that trimmer maxed out. Now we'll adjust the oscillator trimmer, which is this trimmer on this particular back section of the tuning capacitor. Its adjustment determines how accurate the dial pointer is. Well, that helped a great deal. We have much more volume now. That station is very hot. This is probably the best AM station we have, but it's the weakest of the bunch.
More engaged than most. I'm simply saying that the way this story is being told is bigger than the walls.
So sign the petition now at endthebordercrisis.com or call now 800-933-1518. That's 800-933-1518.
Okay, we started to have a little trouble with stability, and the fact that I could touch the chassis and performance would improve, so I started checking a few things. We have this, what appears to be a mica capacitor. It might actually be a paper capacitor that looks like a mica. Some of those did exist back then. It's in the AVC line. Red, violet, red. That looks like 2700 picofarad. Checking this capacitor on the old Heathkit condenser checker from the early 50s. We're not getting any eye deflection when I rotate the knob, and when I check it for leakage, this thing's acting very, very leaky. That light should not even be illuminated. And that's at the lowest voltage on my tester. So yeah, let's replace this. Okay, I just went ahead and replaced that with a film capacitor. It should work just fine. Replacing that capacitor helped, and when I touch the chassis now, our performance doesn't change. Yeah, it changes a little bit on that station. It's the powerhouse. No change on that station. Oh yeah, that's good.
Go Dream Girl. Call the MLT at 601-482-6371 or log on at meridianlittletheater.com.
I'm Nick, and I'm Al. We're the great-grandsons of Papa
Turn the light off here.
Only the name has changed. Old country Italian cuisine and hospitality is still our total dedication.
And before, when I turned the light off, we got modulation hum with the fluorescent light off. Now we don't get that, so that's a good sign.
Still teaching help. Pizza, pasta, calzone.
So, yeah, there is a level of sort of, it reminds me of the anthrax situation
shown
all
these
back
other,
in 2001 when it sort of
all this
spread
other
out
crap off.
Here and there and maybe everywhere. The White House...
I thought I was too young.
I didn't think
Okay, I think this thing's about ready to put back together. Now here's the cabinet. It's in fair shape. The dial cover is gone, needs to be replaced. Actually, it was there, but it was so dingy and crusty that when I tried to clean it by soaking it in soapy water, the thing disintegrated. And I think there was some kind of decorative plastic piece that went across here, but that's long gone. The only way I know to fix that problem is to find another junker radio just like this one that still has the piece on it. Well, isn't this nice? Get it back together and now it won't come on. That's usually when they decide to show out after I've reassembled them. Well, it seems that our off-on switch has developed an open circuit, but no worries, this is one that someone has replaced at some point. It's actually a dual switch, and the other side of the switch is still good, so I'm just going to simply move these leads over to these bottom two contacts, which are the other switch part of the control, and hopefully we won't have any more problems.
To speak with your fraud resolution department? Please hold. We don't have that. What should I tell the human?
Just make that super annoying modem noise.
Yeah, that's much better.
Hello?
been crossing the unfamiliar spaces. Been chasing my dreams of fame and fame. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Well, I think we can call this one fixed. Okay, now let me demonstrate some things about these hot chassis sets. Back in the 1930s, manufacturers figured out a way to cheapen out on construction of radios and record players by eliminating the power transformer, which would have offered an isolation from earth ground, and they wired the tube filaments in series. And in doing all of that, they generally had one side of the AC power line, this power cord here, connected directly to the chassis, which is the metal frame that the set's built on. Back then, there were not any polarized power plugs, so it was possible to insert the power plug into the receptacle one of two ways. So that means there was a 50-50 chance that one side, the hot side of the line, would be going directly to the chassis here. Now the problem that presents is, if someone happens to be touching the chassis or an exposed control shaft while another part of the body is in contact with something that has a return path to earth ground, then best case scenario, you'd get a nasty shock. Worst case scenario, you'd be 6 foot under. Well, things have improved over the past several decades. We now have polarized line plugs and polarized receptacles that will allow the plug to only be inserted one way. But as you saw earlier in this video, we had to rewire the power switch from the neutral side of the line, which was commonplace back then. We had to wire it into the hot side of the line, and the reason for that is because if we had the set plugged in where the chassis was not hot while it was operating, when the set is turned off, you would have a hot chassis due to the path to chassis provided by the series string tube filaments. So by moving the power switch to the hot side of the line and using a polarized power plug with our wide side being neutral, the narrow side being hot, and assuming our outlet is wired correctly, then that eliminates the possibility of a hot chassis no matter whether the set is on or off. Now let's take a look at our receptacle here. This is the wide blade, which is neutral. This is our narrow blade, which is the hot side of the line, and this is our ground pin. Now checking between hot and neutral, we have 122 volts AC. That's good. Now checking between hot and earth ground, we still have 122 volts. That's fine. Now let's check between neutral and earth ground, and we have nothing. That's what we want to see. Now we'll plug the radio in, and as you can see, you can only insert the plug one way. We have our negative side of the meter connected to earth ground. Radio is turned off. I will now touch our meter probe to the chassis, and we have nothing. That's what we want to see. Now I will switch the radio on. And we still have nothing. That's exactly what we want to see. No voltage on the chassis.
Hello. Hi, I just signed up for your credit report site and I have a problem. I need to speak with your
Okay, currently we have a safe situation, but let's assume that the outlet that the set is plugged into is miswired, and there's actually more of that than you might think, so probably the best thing to do is either get you one of those little cheap outlet testers or use a AC voltmeter to check that the outlet is wired properly. Right now I've simulated a miswired outlet by reversing the polarity of the power plug. And now we will check on the chassis. We have one side of the meter to earth ground. And now we have the other side of the meter on the chassis, and we have 122 volts. That's a very dangerous situation.
At least he was entertaining last night. Wolf Blitzer on CNN.
Okay, there you go. My early 40s general television, radio, all ready to go, hopefully for another 70 years. All right, thanks for watching, and more to come later. But really the best thing as far as dealing with any kind of electronic equipment is use a little common sense when handling it. As in, don't go sticking your hand in the back of it while it's turned on, etc. Now, as far as statistics, I don't know about how many people got killed by those things. I mean, I've heard stories of people getting shocked by them, but obviously they live to tell about it. In reading old publications, I don't see that that was a big problem, but then again, I think people back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s had a little better sense than some people do today, so, you know, that's why I try to make this stuff as safe as possible in case it does wind up in the hands of someone else. You know, the stuff that I'm keeping, it really doesn't matter because, you know, I have a respect for electricity and I know how to treat it. Okay, just recapping, here's the pile of parts that came out of the radio. This is our audio output tube that off camera developed an intermittent short. I could tap the tube and the dial light would get brighter, which indicates an excessive current condition, likely caused by this shorted tube. Here's our 12SQ7 tube that had an open filament. Same thing with the 35Z5 rectifier tube. Here's our nasty looking speaker that we replaced with a new old stock speaker. Here's some resistors that I replaced that were pretty far out of value. Here's that 1000 ohm resistor that was technically still good, but it's so big that it just took up a lot of room and just looked sloppy, so I installed something smaller that looked neater. Here's our electrolytic filter capacitor that's a slopped up mess that somebody made. And here are all our paper capacitors that came out of the unit, including this little domino capacitor that's either a mica or a paper cap and mica clothing, so to speak. It's a mica mold brand that I also call them mica bombs. And here's our old power cord. Okay, now let's analyze these capacitors and see how they truly are. Here's capacitor 1 showing a little leakage at 300 volts applied across it. And of course it's only going to get worse over time, so might as well go ahead and replace it. Cap 2 leaking badly at 20 volts. And of course the higher up you go on the voltage, the worse it leaks. Cap 3 leaky. Cap 4 leaky. Capacitor number 5 leaking like crazy. Cap 6, you see the deal. Cap 7, the mica bomb, leaky like crazy. Yeah, let's just skip the blinking light. Let's just go to a steadily glowing light. And now testing section 1 of the electrolytic filter capacitor. It appears this capacitor is wide open. Now, not wide open, but leaking pretty badly at 200 volts. Section number 2 of the electrolytic capacitor. Yeah, that doesn't look too good. They can burn up a power supply in a heartbeat. Here's resistor number 1, 500K ohm, that somebody had replaced. It likely originally had a 470K ohm resistor installed. This is the grid bias resistor for the audio output tube. It's technically not out of tolerance at 530 ohms. But I decided to go ahead and replace it with a 470 just to get it back down where it's supposed to be. it would have still worked just fine with this. Resistor number 2 is supposed to be a 500 ohm. It's reading 778 ohms, which is about 280 ohms. We'll just round it up to out of tolerance. Yeah, that one was pretty bad. 150 ohm cathode bias resistor for the audio output tube, reading 265 ohms, we'll say, which is pretty far off. Here's a 50k ohm resistor reading 82,000 ohms. Here's another 500k ohm resistor reading about 860,000 ohms. This was in the B plus line to the 12SQ7 driver and detector tube. And here's that big green wire wound resistor measuring 912 ohms. And like I said, the only reason I replaced that is because it was so big that it looked just sloppy in the circuit, and I don't like sloppy looking repair work, so I replaced it with something smaller. And I'll keep this resistor for a future project, because these generally, when they fail, they usually burn wide open. They usually don't go up in value, although I've seen it happen some, but not much. So this one is actually worth hanging on to. And just for fun, I cracked open the mica bomb capacitor, and it truly is a mica capacitor. You can see the mica sheet there. I just wanted to see what that was, because some of these were actually paper capacitors that actually looked like micas. The name mica mold does not necessarily mean that it's a mica capacitor. Mica mold was simply the brand, and they made these in both paper and mica versions. And I've heard it said that mica capacitors don't leak. Well, this video just proves that wrong, and you might recall another video I did a while back showing that they do indeed leak, so it's just best to test them just to be on the safe side.
Is not a part of the decision.
Okay, there we go.
At the top bar, search user.
Okay, wonderful. That's the reason you count it all when you fall into diverse temptations. Now, if you flunk the test, it's terrible.
Entertainment at Wide, man. Some of those people gonna be entertaining there and then live band. Now, I gotta tell you, our very own Dice Man will be there 2 hours. I don't know the time yet. I think somewhere around 4. We're gonna call that barbecue time. Around about 4 o'clock, he's gonna be there for 2 hours. It might be 7 o'clock.
Through fiery trials, thy pathway shall lie.
What's happening here? And I don't.
That's where ZipRecruiter.com comes in. With your one.
Yeah, I'm not going to be much below 910, and it's not late enough to get much out of town.
Yeah, that's perfectly legal. I just, you're asking my opinion, and I'm an expert on my opinion, and so I wouldn't do that.
There's the back of the radio all lit up. Okay, there you go. I'm finally done.
I would not.
We'll move on to something else later.
But if there was any way I could avoid it, I would.